Hello, and thank you for joining me today, where we're going to talk about configuring edge connectors using the QNect component of the Quartic platform, so we can stream data from your data sources such as MQTT devices, OPC UA servers, PLCs, up into your Quartic platform for storage, contextualization, and building machine learning models. Before we go into the actual configuration, let's go through the components of the Quartic edge connectivity. So for tying into the different data sources, that edge connectivity itself, we have the QLite component. So this has different drivers to tie into the data sources, pull out that data in real time, and stream it up into the QPro, which is really the workhorse of the Quartic platform. So this QPro is where all the data storage, contextualization, analytics, application, all that is in this QPro, which is typically in the cloud, but can also be deployed on-premise. Now, in order to securely send that data from the edge to the cloud, there are a couple layers we can add in between. The first is a QFog, which serves as a proxy layer between the QPro and the QLite. And then if needed, if you have multiple network layers that we have to traverse, we have to go over multiple firewalls, we can also add in a QRelay, which is really just a data forwarder. So these four different components allow us to tie into data sources, then securely move across different network layers until the data finally lands in the QPro, which is typically in the cloud where we want to do work with our data. So if we look at more of an architecture layout of this, we have at the bottom all of our different data sources. The QLites connect into those data sources, move that data up into either a QRelay and then a QFog, or directly into that proxy layer of the QFog, and then up into the QPro at the top. Now, one thing I'll point out is we're looking at a QNect 1.0 architecture. We're currently undergoing an architecture revamp of our edge connectivity, so there's lots of internal changes going on, but the main one you need to be aware of when configuring this is we're combining the capability of the QLite and the QFog, really moving that proxy component into the QLite itself. So if you look at a QNect 2.0 architecture, it's now possible to have a QLite directly connecting to the QPro because this already has that proxy, that QFog piece built into it. So really we're simplifying the deployment and architecture, but if you want to still have that QFog in there for an additional network hop, we can still include that. So we're simplifying it and also adding more flexibility to the possible architectures of deployment for our edge connectors. All of the new connectors, when they come out, they'll all be on this QNect 2.0 architecture. So for now, just be aware of the slight configuration difference between any connectors that are a bit older on 1.0 versus the new ones coming out on 2.0. So with that, let's hop into the platform and we'll take a look at how to configure an architecture similar to this for edge connectivity. So here we are in the Quartic platform, and to configure my edge connectivity, I'm going to come into my QNect module. Then I'll navigate to the site where I want to configure this edge connectivity. I have a new site, this chemicals manufacturing, and I'll come into this edit site map button. So I'll click on this. You'll see at the very top level we have our QPro. This is something you'll never have to configure. This QPro is set up during the installation process, and then you can just add your edge nodes underneath that. So I'm going to come in, I'm going to do the full hierarchy of going from QLite to QRelay to QFog, and then finally QPro. So I will add my QFog, which again is serving as a proxy layer. So this is going to be my chemicals QFog. Windows operating system is where I'm installing it. I'll put in my IP address. And I'm going to use a no proxy here. If I choose default proxy, this is going to use the default HTTP proxy with port 3128. Or if you have a specific proxy that you've set up or that your IT department has set up, we can set that up here as well with my credentials for authenticating to that, my subdomain, and my proxy URL. Again, just for simplicity, I'll stick with no proxy for now and save that. I have to enter my username and password. And then that gets created. So we can see this tree starting to build out. So here's my QFog. Now under that, I want to add an edge QRelay. So I could, again, I don't necessarily need the QRelay. This is just if I want to hop over multiple network layers. I will add one. I could also just go to a QLite. So QRelay. And it's going to ask for the same information as for the QFog. So I'll just give it the name QRelay. Again, an IP address. And the same proxy settings as before. So this is the exact same configuration. Looks very similar because QFog has slightly different functionality, but the configuration is really the same. It's really just a data forwarder to move data from your more secure network layers up into the cloud within your QPro. So I'll save this off. Again, username and password. And then finally, I want to add my actual edge connectivity, that QLite. So I'll add in a QLite node underneath this. In Windows, this will be 10.0.3. Same settings for the proxy, so you could have a proxy on the QLite configured as well. I'll stick with no proxy, and then I'll save this. So just like that, we've created that tree where we looked at that architecture diagram going from a QLite at the bottom all the way up. And now we can add in the actual data source connections. So for each QLite, we can have up to 4 different unique data source connections. So I could add, say, OPC DA, Modbus MQTT, and OPC UA all under the same QLite. Specific data source connectivity is covered in another video. There's a specific one for each one of the data source types. So I'll just very quickly add an OPC DA one, just to give you an idea. So we'll do this is going to be my OPC DA server name. We can set how frequently we want to scan the data point, so I'll just do every 15 seconds. And then finally my time zone, I'm in the Eastern US. So that's all we have to do to add that data source. We'll save that. And that's just to show you this full tree built out all the way down to our data source connectivity. So that's all we have to do to set up this edge connectivity. It's fairly fast and simple. You just need the IP addresses of your different machines to set that up. I'll also come in just to show you the slight difference with QNect 2.0. So again, we have QNect 1.0 is just QNect, and then we have 2.0. And again, the difference here is the functionality of the QFog, that proxy layer, is combined into the QLite. So if I come in and edit the site map, you'll notice in here, I now have before I could only add a QFog. Here I can directly add a QLite directly to the QPro. So I'll add a QLite. And then this will be, actually, this is, save this off. And now I can add data sources here, which you'll notice the data sources for QNect 2.0 are different than the ones for 1.0, just because these are the data source connections that have been built on this new QNect 2.0 architecture. And that should be all you need to know for configuring your edge connectivity within the Quartic platform. It should be fairly fast, simple, straightforward. That's what we're intending here. For more details on configuring the specific data source connections like OPC UA here, and also for installing these edge connectors on the edge nodes on the VMs, see our other videos. And as always, if you have any questions, please reach out to us here at Quartic AI.